They say, well, all these good things come out of it. Well, yeah, but you don't have a choice.
You're a tiny voice in a very loud and big country. Of course, you're not going to be heard, and that's going to feel unfair when you're on, the other side of the decision that's being made.
I don't give a shit what anybody does as long as they're not doing it to me against my will.
But real quick before I forget, maybe I already did forget. There was a great alien that once said, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few."
Or the one. I love the government, and I'm going to give them. I support everything they do. So take my money. You can't have proper representation when there are political parties involved, because the political parties act in their own self-interest, not in yours. Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we'd really like it if you'd share this video, like, and subscribe to the channel. That'd be awesome, and that's what awesome people do, and you're awesome.
Yeah, and I'm Line. Oh yeah, I'm Casey Rochford, and we would love it if you would stick around to the end and check out the music we write, because it's awesome, and that's what awesome people do as well. So why don't we you recently had a minute microscopy, one of our shorter episodes about the consent of the governed, and I thought that we could really take that and fly with it, because there's a lot that comes out of that you can't really just cover in a minute.
No, in fact, that minute microscopy was longer than a minute, as they tend to be. Oh yeah,
we're in the ballpark of a minute, so
we aim for a minute. It's like
2-minute microscopy doesn't roll off the tongue, so
exactly, and usually it's less than 2 minutes, except for that one that you did. But anyway, yeah. So what do you think is a good starting point coming off of that particular minute microscopy?
Well, I did actually have a conversation with somebody a while back, now that I remember. They were talking about how they thought they shouldn't have to pay tax because of the whole theory of the consent of the governed, and they said, well, I don't consent to all these stupid, ridiculous taxes, so I shouldn't have to pay them. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, well, I'm gonna look into the meaning of this consent of the governed, and I kind of came up with a vastly different conclusion. So I kind of wonder what your thoughts are on whether or not one should be taxed if they don't agree with the tax.
Well, there's the whole concept of taxation is theft, right? And I'm sure you've heard people say that. And I don't know that it would be, well, okay, we have to kind of decide on what kind of taxation we're talking about, because there's sales tax and excise taxes and income taxes. And there's taxes all over the place.
I think it's basically income tax. I mean, we could just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I'd agree that that's kind of a good place to go, because sales tax is vastly different than income.
Yeah, income tax is federal. It's inwardly facing. It's so we don't want to jump into tariffs or anything else that could be kind of remotely lumped in with that. But the idea that the federal government takes a portion of our paychecks and does what seems like whatever they want,
Seems like. Yeah. I mean, essentially, income tax is a tax on your labor, and versus sales tax, it's like, point of sale kind of thing, like transactions. And I mean, I guess you could say that labor is a form of transaction as well, but
I mean, the way I rationalize it is that the government is there doing services. I kind of see it like a business. The business has to have money, and the people that are using those services have to pay into it somehow, and you can't feasibly invoice 350 million people for totally a la carte, like, well, you use the hospital, you drove on X amount of roads, you just can't.
Actually, as the road one here in Washington State, they're talking about a tax based on miles driven, instead of eventually instead of the fuel tax and other taxes that fund road development. But
I like the eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It's it'll
be both because it's Washington State.
Yeah, they probably for about 20 years. Yeah, if this ever gets instituted. But so you brought up a lot of different points there. I just kind of want to go back to the whole, like, let's look at it philosophically. Like, could income tax be considered theft? I don't know that I would consider it theft. Like, to me, theft is somebody points a gun at you, they take your wallet, somebody breaks into your house, they take your TV, they steal your bike from the front porch, or your packages from Amazon.
It's without your knowledge, basically. Or
theft is like a direct force kind of thing. Whereas I guess I can actually kind of understand what people are, where they're coming from. You could almost equate it to a form of extortion. Extortion being the use of threat to coerce you into giving up your money. So it's not necessarily voluntary. You're doing it because there's a threat behind it, but no one's actually just grabbing something from you. There's a threat behind it, and then you voluntarily hand over goods.
No, it is definitely like textbook extortion. Like, anytime the government comes and takes money from you or demands money from you, and you're like, no, and they're like, well, if you don't, then we will garnish your wages and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're not going to stick guns in your face or anything. Nobody's telling the truth when they're like, they're going to come with guns if you don't pay your taxes. Like, no.
Well, actually, ultimately, it could lead to that. So, I mean, think about a situation like this. You don't pay some tax, right? Income tax. Sales tax is a little bit difficult to avoid, but let's say it's a property tax or something like that. You don't pay it. They send you bills, they send you notices, that kind of thing, and ever increasing levels of threateningness. And you still don't pay. And, eventually there's going to be some kind of agent of whatever organization is taxing you that arrives at your house. They may attempt to take those things. I mean, IRS definitely has taken things directly, come up to people's houses and grabbed it, which does kind of, I guess it does lend a little credence to the idea that taxation is theft. But then, so here's the thing. If you resist, then they're going to forcefully push back against you, which could involve the force of arms. I mean, if you draw a firearm and there's cops involved, the cops are going to draw theirs, and it'll be a gunfight. So in a way,
that's different though. That's not them knocking on the door and pointing a gun at you and saying, "Time to pay up, motherfucker."
No, that's true. That
It's
is
you
true.
resisting a lawful collection of debt, and then they have to resort to force because you have resisted. So it's, it's gray, but I mean,
Yeah,
it
but
is.
ultimately behind it, if you follow it through, it could result in violence.
Yeah, but that's not like the go-to. And
no, but it isn't, because again, it goes back to this idea that it's extortion.
Yeah. And by the way, they hate it when you point that out. They get really mad, really mad.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that I can't honestly, like, looking at it, if you look at it from a logical standpoint, it is absolutely extortion, regardless of how legitimate it is. It is, like you said, textbook extortion.
Yeah. But it's like, think of it like extortion. Think you're in Little Italy and you got your pizzeria, and the mafia comes in and says, there's a lot of hooligans out there. They could come in here and bust your joint up, and then you'd be out of business. But for a nominal monthly fee, we'll make sure that doesn't happen. If it's not that much, you're probably going to pay it because they've got the power to do that. They're willing to do it for you. It's a friendly transaction at that point, and that is extortion, but I mean, is it worth it? Maybe.
Yeah, you might not be able to avoid extortion. I guess there's a difference between the mafia and the state.
A little bit.
The state has a monopoly, whereas the state has a monopoly on the initiation of force, and the mafia doesn't. In fact, there might be competing factions of the mafia attempting to get your protection money. Obviously, because there's the other guy they're protecting you against. So,
well, it's not a total monopoly. You could always enlist the help of a foreign government to protect you from this government. Trump.
yeah. That would it's a whole different angle. One thing you brought up too is the services side of things. Like, and I've heard this because I'm no stranger to these kinds of discussions and arguments. So whether externally or internally, I've wrestled with a lot of these ideas myself, and arriving at where I've landed, I guess, in my current philosophical place in life. But the fact that you're given services in exchange for this money that you give, I don't know that necessarily justifies it, because people say, well, all these good things come out of it. Well, yeah, but you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice whether you want to fund roads or education or medical research or the space program or wars. What if you don't agree? What if you're a pacifist and you hate the fact that there's a military engaging in wars abroad, and you don't want your money to go there? Well, you have no choice. They're just going to take it. What if you think the education system is doing an absolutely atrocious job and maybe actually harming kids more than it's helping them? You still have no choice. And you have no choice in really the way that money is spent or the policies surrounding the expenditures. Like, you can't necessarily go and directly manage the school system or the military or anything like that. So I think people might have a little bit of, I think you're somewhat justified in complaining about that or having a problem with it.
I mean, you can certainly complain, but I mean, yes and no. Whether when it comes to, like, do you have a choice or say, like, no, each individual person, you can't be like, I think this war on terror is bullshit, and I think we should just pull out. Well, it's like, you're a tiny voice in a very loud and big country, of course you're not going to be heard, and that's going to feel unfair when you're on, the other side of the decision that's being made.
Well,
But
actually, the thing that I in the minute microscopy that I brought up is, given that half the population roughly votes, and a majority of that would be a quarter of the population. What if half the population didn't like the fact that we were engaged in foreign conflicts for oil or whatever? That's actually, they outnumber the people that voted the politicians in place who are enacting these policies.
so
So, I mean,
why did they make the choice not to vote then? Because, I mean, that is a choice in itself. Like, I kind of hate that phrase, but it is true.
well, but then again, given the picks that people have, the choices you have, which are kind of fed up to you, like basically you don't have the pick of everybody. You kind of have the select few to choose from, and what if none of them really align with your views? Like that's my issue.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the case, but it's like, if that's your choice and you decide not to choose anything, you're effectively giving consent to the representatives that the rest of the country has chosen to make whatever decisions they make. And, you can complain all you want. You have the right to complain whether or not you vote. Don't let anyone tell you if you don't vote, you have no right to complain, because that's just bullshit. But,
I agree.
that you can just complain, and that's about all you can do. I mean, voting isn't perfect, but it's probably, I mean, I can't think of a better way to do it that would actually work, because if everyone got to do what they wanted to do, everyone would be miserable, because everyone else would be able to do shitty things to them or shitty things around them.
Well, yeah, if it was basically like anyone could do whatever they want, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're, the important thing is, of course, to you could, well, we're going down like a completely different tangent here, but just to sum it up, you could do whatever you want as long as you're not impeding somebody else's right to life and freedom and things like that. I don't give a shit what anybody does as long as they're not doing it to me against
But
my will.
yeah, but
So,
somebody's got to be the arbiter of that, decision. Like, has somebody imposed upon your free will? You can't just, it can't just be between two parties at certain points. There has to be a mediator, and that's what, is the seed of government that grows into this monstrosity that equals the growth of the country, basically. Like, you can have a small government for a small society, but you can't really effectively run a large society with a small government. I mean, depending on what your definition of small is, but
well, yeah, I mean, but then the thing is, does this state entity actually perform that function? Is that what it actually does? Does it work in our interest, or does it work in its own interest?
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole, I think.
Yeah. Let's go back, because yeah, we could go in like a whole lot of different directions here, and we probably will in future episodes.
Yeah.
But talking about these services, like, this is one of the thoughts that I had that kind of changed my mind about it. Like, people saying, well, you get these things for tax money and stuff like that. Well, what if somebody robbed you at gunpoint, right? Or something like that, or extorted money from you? They took like $100 from you, but in exchange, they gave you their jacket or their shoes or something like that. Even if you didn't want them, like maybe their shoes are all nasty and the jacket's all filthy and stuff like that, but hey, it gave you something in exchange. And that's kind of my thought, is like, that doesn't necessarily logically justify extortion. Just because you're given something in exchange doesn't necessarily make it just. only if it's something that you actually ask for. Like if you go to McDonald's and you order a cheeseburger and they give you a cheeseburger and charge you a certain amount of money, well, that's legit. You actually asked for that and you got it. Fair trade, right? But somebody taking something from you by force, and it needs to be said, taxation is force. At some point down the chain, there is the ultimate outcome of some use of force. Otherwise, why would anybody do it?
Yeah,
they don't do it because they're altruistic, and they're just like, oh, I love the government, and I'm going to give them. I support everything they do, so take my money.
Yeah,
they don't do that. It's fear. Fear is the driving force behind taxation. If you've seen some of the things that people have to deal with, how people go white as a sheet when they think that the IRS is coming down on them. Why is that? It's because they can fucking ruin your life. That's why.
I do want to get to the opting out idea, but real quick before I forget, maybe I already did forget. Oh no, we were talking about services. So there was a great alien that once said, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few,"
or the one.
Yeah, or the one. And and then so when you have these services that are provided to society on the whole, it's generally because representatives who were chosen by the people have saw fit to think that these benefit the majority of people. And
no, they don't.
They do. Like maintaining roads keeps us from, keeps us from not being able to get to work or whatever and contribute to the economy and all that stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, like the point is, like, yeah, you can disagree with certain things and stuff, and you may not like what you're getting from it. But whether or not half the people vote or not, like there's statistical laws basically that say like there's enough sample size in there to accurately portray the actual like 100% coverage basically. Like even if only half of people are voting, that's like 20 or 30% more data than you actually need to accurately predict what everybody in the country in the majority wants. And so like right there, like you basically just have like the best system you can really come up with to make the most people happy, like, because you can't make everyone happy, right? I mean,
no, that's true. And well, I'd argue that may not necessarily be the best system, that the best system's never been tried yet. And there could be something better. But I would say that it's a functioning system. A really rickety truck that's all rusted and clunking down the road and stuff like that, but still hauls things to the dump. It's functional.
Yeah,
it does work. It's like, but it has problems. And so,
well, to quote another great person, somebody once said, "If there's a new way, I'll be the first in line, but it better work this time."
Yeah, well, unfortunately with governments, it never quite works. And we keep trying the same things over and over and over again and expecting different results. And we all know what that means. But your famous alien quote, when he said the needs of the many outweigh, or the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, he himself was sacrificing. He was giving of himself. He wasn't telling somebody else to give. He was doing it to save other people. And so I think that is a little bit different than pointing a gun at somebody and say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Or he was passive aggressively telling Kirk he was a dick for not making that call because he's the outranking officer. It should have been him.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, we gotta go back into another Trek episode apparently on this one. Yeah, that's a good point though.
So to get to the idea of, can you opt out?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, is there? I mean, you can leave the country, right? But
it'll cost you.
Yeah,
that's one thing.
FATCA, right? The what was it? Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. Basically, like, if you leave the country and you don't renounce your U.S. citizenship, you'll still have to pay tax here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'll pay income tax on income earned in another country. Not only that, but just to renounce your citizenship costs you money. Like, you have to pay.
I couldn't find data on that. I've heard that, but I could not verify it.
It's like $2,000 or something like that, roughly. All the paperwork and fees and rigmarole and stuff, and it's like, well,
it's like
if it's actually
a fraction of that to become a citizen.
Yeah. Well, that's true. But if it's really truly a voluntary thing, you should just be able to sign some form and walk away. Yeah. Otherwise, if you have to pay $2,000, I mean, not everybody has that kind of money. Not only that, but it costs money to go somewhere else.
Right. I was going to say, if you don't have that kind of money, you don't have the money to get out of this country.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of have to work with the system you're in. And I think,
well, that's why I get really pissed off when people are like, well, if you don't leave it, you're going to just leave the country. It's like, oh, please. I would love to, if you would like to crowdfund that opportunity for me, because
we're going to come back to that. I have a thought. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I really, I don't know, to circle back around to the consent of the governed. I really thought, well, what did this mean originally? Why did it show up on the Declaration of Independence? And I think it kind of spurred from the Boston Tea Party, or parties, I guess, because there were more than one.
I think people should read the Federalist Papers, because that kind of outlines a lot of the origins of the U.S., actually, like all the philosophies, a lot of arguments.
Thomas Paine's comments.
There were a lot of players in that, actually. But it really illustrates what the intent was. And I probably should have brought that up in our first episode on the Second Amendment, because it explains what the intent of the Second Amendment was, and others. Yeah, what do you think the meaning is?
Well, I mean, they actually, unlike many of the things that wound up in the Constitution, it was actually pretty clear. Well, I guess this wasn't really in the Constitution. Anyway, it was pretty clear that, based off of what they had been going through with England, they were angry because they were being taxed without any representation in Parliament. Now,
sort of like Puerto Rico.
Or Washington, D.C. They don't have, they don't have a seat in Congress or anything. So, and there is movement to make them a 51st state, and I'd be fine with that, because they really ought. I mean, there's a lot of people living there.
Yeah, or Guam, or it's other U.S. territories. Like, why are they?
They're going to be under one political umbrella. They need to have representation.
Sure.
And so, there's an argument to be had there that, maybe people in D.C. shouldn't pay tax, but that is what it boils down to, is that they clearly stated you will be a consensual governed person by participating or not in a vote for a person to represent your particular, it was, they used colony, but now it's state, basically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do, and that's how it trickles up, like we vote on somebody to say, hey, we like the way you think. Why don't you just go and vote within yourselves on what should be a law and what should be a tax and blah, blah, blah. And it, and that's how it goes. So, I mean, everyone is technically consensual in what's decided.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could say not voting is a form of some kind of protest as well, um, and
Yeah. I mean,
that's a good point. That maybe. Well, so here's the thing: going back to the founding of the country, there was a lot of resistance to the idea of political parties, which I think do a lot more harm than good.
oh
And
yeah,
we've discussed that the idea of partisanship, like it does divide people, and it kind of compartmentalizes philosophical ideas into these broad, huge boxes of it's
yeah. I
that's the
mean,
problem with representation. Like, you can't have proper representation when there are political parties involved, because the political parties act in their own self-interest, not in yours. If you had somebody who represented you who didn't have a party, and well, we talked about Bernie Sanders. Like, I have to give him a little bit of credit for being mostly independent. I don't know why he's going with the DNC, but he's mostly independent. And you have Ross Perot back in the day, self-funded, ran for president, probably almost made it, but he was independent too.
mm-hmm.
And I'd like to see more independent representatives, because I think that would be
Wasn't
a,
Nader also a kind of a big player in
I
independent?
possibly, like, that's a little before my time, but
Ralph
yeah.
Nader?
And
No, he ran in like the 90s, didn't he?
really, oh,
Yeah. I
huh,
mean, I remember it, and I'm younger than you, so.
oh yeah. Oh, you're totally older than me. Physically.
Our watchers will
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think the problem is this party system and this divide where it's an either or kind of thing, especially the whole two-party thing. Like, that is nonsense. That's that's why, like, to me, it's hopeless. Like, what's the point? Oh wait, your sound. Nope, no sound. Shit.
Is it back now?
Almost.
Almost.
Make a little bit of noise or something. Yeah.
It's not
Oh,
like that though.
no, that's
Oh,
good.
here we go. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
All right. Remind me, what was I saying?
I couldn't hear, so.
Oh shit.
Okay, so I'll just go back to what I was saying. I was saying the idea that there's this partisanship and either or, this
Oh
divide.
yeah. No, you can totally have. I mean, I think it's bullshit, and it would be better without parties. But I mean, for the people that like to point to something and say, "Oh yeah, I kind of fall into that box," you can have tons of parties and still have a totally valid election. Like Sweden does that. There's like pretty much a new party takes control every few years
Yeah,
because
I was
you
going to
know what?
mention
Yeah, I mean,
Sweden.
all you do is you just vote the way you normally do, and whoever gets the most.
Yeah, well, the UK is another one that has more than two parties.
Yeah, it doesn't have
And
to be one versus the other.
the problem here is that the big two have become so big that people vote like the lesser of two evils, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want the other guy to win, you know.
Yeah.
And
I'm,
that's a huge problem, because
oh yeah, it
now you
is.
have, yeah, you're no longer voting for somebody to represent you. You're voting for somebody to get rid of the other person.
Yeah, it,
It's
it
like,
it takes away your choice effectively. Like there,
yeah,
but as shitty as it is, and I do agree that it sucks. Um, like you kind of when things get really bad, you kind of don't have a choice. You know, like this is the way it is, and you either have to play the game or risk it getting worse. You know.
I, I okay, yeah. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. But I think that, for me, I've given up on using politics to affect change. I believe in changing the hearts and minds of my fellow human beings, like having conversations, kitchen sink microscopies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a much better way, because eventually people will be enlightened and they'll actually branch out into these kinds of other things, take a few chances once in a while, and not see things in black and white or red and blue in terms of the US.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more colors in the spectrum. Come on, people.
Yeah. Well, no, I think our colors represent us pretty well. Red for Republicans, blue for Democrats, white for the white supremacists. Yeah, that pretty much covers it.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, but the thing is, there's a lot of other parties in the U.S., as you'd mentioned before in a minute microscopy, and I think they deserve a lot more attention. Some of them have really good ideas, and really, we should be looking at it. I think it's been said the U.S. is kind of like a grand experiment. And I think the experiment is still ongoing. There's a lot of people who claim to know the right way, when I think if you do, you might as well start going to church and preaching.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows the right way, because we've only tried like a couple different ways so far. And I think it's important, like you'd said, in Sweden, it kind of revolves around quite a few more parties, and there's a lot more different ideas being tried out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Of course, Sweden is a lot smaller, so those ideas might affect a lot more change and be a lot more visible than they would in the U.S., where you could have somebody from any party come in, and things aren't really going to be that different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think size of the country makes much of a difference as far as like diversity of ideas goes.
No. But as far as like the political system,
yeah,
Sweden's system involves far fewer players and organizations and administrative personnel than the U.S. does. We have a lot more people here,
right?
And the system is a lot more difficult to change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I ultimately I would really like to see. I just want to see somebody who could possibly change our system enough to where there's term limits on the Senate and the House of Representatives and stuff, because I think that's the kind of the root of the problem in the two-party system, is that these guys get in there for life, and when there's only two parties in there, they just perpetuate this like ongoing
I totally
rivalry.
agree. I totally agree. And to expand it a bit further, you have another system that has people that are in there for life, and that's the court
judiciary system.
There's judges that they're there for life. Like, why not cycle some people out from time to time, get some new ideas?
Mm-hmm.
We act like the judges are gods.
Yeah, in a previous episode or two, you've mentioned the idea of having a lottery for presidency, and that would actually make sense for the judiciary system as well. Just have the lottery like be within the legal environment, of course. Lawyers and stuff like that get called up in a lottery. I mean that's the natural progression, lawyer to judge.
That is true, and maybe changing the way the judicial system works might help lawyers have a bit more of a more personable interpretation from people. But yeah, I agree that a lottery is definitely the way to go.
Yeah. Now, before we digress too far from the taxation or theft idea, I kind of feel skeptical that we're represented at all, because here in Washington State, we voted against having a new tunnel, and yet they were like, well, we're going to do a new tunnel and you're going to pay a toll. And then we voted to have $30 car tabs instead of being, priced out of the bank with, the blue book value or whatever it was they were basing it on. And they were
Oh,
like,
it was different than that, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, whatever it was, they were like, well, you voted for that, sure, but we're still going to charge you a bunch of money. So, like we vote for shit here in Washington, and they just go ahead and do what they want anyway.
Well, yeah, and Pierce County in Washington voted against the whole train system, the ST3 thing, Sound Transit project, and that we're still on the hook now because enough people voted for it up north. Yeah, and by the way, that project I think is it? Oh, I gotta look up the numbers again. It's either half or the exact same dollar amount adjusted for inflation as the moon landing. Like the cost to go, let's say it's a half of the cost to go to the moon, to develop a never before developed system, to create a briefcase sized computer, to develop the rockets, the Atlas V, all the command module, all that stuff, all the testing, all the spacesuits, all the technology, the lander, all that stuff, and put people on the moon for the first moon landing costs the same as building a little tiny stretch of rail system.
And it's going to take twice as long.
Exactly. Like, what the hell? Oh, yeah.
That is such a slow project. Oh, my God. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that...
So I mean,
that illustrates the inefficiency of a state-based system. That is it.
Yep. Yeah. So like, it really does frustrate me as a voter, and I'm new to voting. Like I for a very long time, I firmly held the belief that your vote doesn't matter. It's not worth your time. Nobody gives a shit what you think. Like the Electoral College is stacked against you. Like it's
welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Hey, all right.
but I mean, like around 2012, I started voting, and I mean, yeah, somewhere in the back of my head, I'm still hearing that little voice like, your vote isn't going to be counted. And if it is, they're just going to be like, well, we'll do what we want anyway.
Well, and they probably will. I mean, that's not to say people shouldn't vote. I don't want to discourage people from participating in that system because I think
I mean,
it has merits, but
yeah.
I think you should also be skeptical and you should do your own research, like dig into it, try to find answers and question things. Like this is an experiment. Like this isn't the best system. This is just the system we have.
Right. So theoretically, if everybody voted, things would work better. Like the Electoral College wouldn't really have power because if everybody voted and the Electoral College went against their constituents, they know they would be voted out because everyone would get pissed off.
Yeah.
So like if everyone did exercise their right to vote, it would actually work really well. Like the less people that vote, the worse it becomes. So like like you said, your majority pool starts to represent, the smaller the pool gets, the less accurate the representation of the whole is. Mm-hmm. But when we're sitting at half, that's actually still really, really good as far as like a projection goes. But as far as like making as many people happy as possible is nowhere near the mark.
That's true. And I would agree with that. The problem is that not every government position is voted on. There are a lot of unelected people, bureaucracies and things like that. And also partisanship does create an artificial divide between people. We're not voting based on principle. We're voting based on parties. And I think that kind of muddies the waters. It kind of creates a system that really isn't representative of everybody. So I think there are a lot of flaws in the system as it stands on those grounds. Just my thought.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Like, I'm a big fan of the popular vote, for federal level stuff like the president and whatnot. And I think a popular vote for taxes would be a good idea too, because it basically takes away the need for representatives almost entirely. But I mean, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but we get ballots every so often to vote on local taxes. It really wouldn't be like that much time out of our lives to vote on federal taxes either, things that come out of our paychecks.
yeah, no, I totally agree. Now, here's the problem, or I guess I want to expand on that idea. It's one thing to vote on a particular tax. Sorry, as far as the federal government's concerned, you have revenue coming in from income taxes, and they kind of divide it up. Congress does that, where things are going to go. They allocate it and all this. What if you could vote on where you wanted your money to go? Like maybe if you don't have any control over how much is taken out, what if you could pick what you want to fund?
No, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, so if enough people hate foreign wars, well, we just won't fund it.
Yeah.
If people don't like the idea of a stupid wall down south between the U.S. and Mexico, well, we won't fund it.
Oh man,
if people like space,
in the internet age, we could totally do that. You
Yeah.
could totally elect for all of that stuff on a W-2 or whatever. Just make it 3 pages longer or whatever.
Sure, there's a list of all of the things they want to spend money on, and you check off the things you want your money to go to.
Mhm.
And I think that would be pretty fair, actually.
Oh,
like, let's say,
that would be actually a very excellent system, because like I said, the whole would, everyone that works would then be contributing their idea of what they want paid into, and basically, like, it would cover, say, like 60% of people want universal health care. There would be enough to cover that 60% of people, basically. And the people that would never use it anyway don't have to, and they don't pay for it.
Exactly. If you want like the space program to be funded more, you could put more money into that, more money into education, and individually your slice of that particular funding would get diverted to those particular places. I think that would be legit.
Yeah.
And people would feel more like their effort has not been in vain. Like they're doing some good. It's the same thing with charities. You choose where you donate, and
you mentioned education. That reminded me of something way super earlier in the show, when you were talking about how you don't really have a choice on education or something. I mean, you do have private schools and homeschooling options, so there is opting out on that. Like, if you don't think public education is the greatest, you do have other options.
Except you still have to pay for it.
Well, yeah.
So true. You're paying twice, but go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's an excellent idea. Like that's not like true, like it's not truly a la carte, but it's as close as you can get to, I think.
Yeah, and enough people, if enough people believe in something, it will totally be funded. And the stuff that's unpopular won't be funded. Bullshit, pork barrel projects and the
we would totally
F-35 fighter that would never get funded.
Yeah, we wouldn't be in half as many wars, or
no, we wouldn't be. And okay, so taking it, using the internet and things like that, and current day options that are available, I'm going to take it a step further. Why don't we crowdfund government projects? The ST3 rail system, or that tunnel in Seattle and stuff like that. If it's really something people actually want, crowdfund it. And if they don't want it, well, they're not going to pay for it. You know, if it's actually a legit thing that people really care about and really want, they'll put money into it. I mean, hell, look at like Indiegogo and GoFundMe and all this stuff. People have dumped like billions of dollars in total on like stupid things like self-filling water bottles and underwater breathing stuff like the Snorkel and stuff like that. I mean, you know, people fund these stupid ass projects. What about the things that really matter? Like, you know, some kind of improvements to systems.
Yeah.
If it really matters, people will put their money down because they want it.
Yeah, because I mean, like, here's another Washington example. The car tab thing, everyone was like really mad that got voted for because a lot of that money went to public transit, and that benefited, you know, like lower income people and whatnot. But then there's this fare enforcement that like jumps. I did a minute microscopy on this. This fare enforcement like jumps on these rapid ride buses where you just tap your you know bus card outside, and then when the bus comes along, you just hop on in the back or whatever. And they basically just kind of target the poor people that are like hoping to like skirt the system so they can get to work and like feed themselves, and that fee for, you know, like jumping the bus when you didn't pay is like not only twice what you would pay for like a parking ticket, but 100% of it goes to the state and none of it goes to public transit. So it's like,
what?
Yeah, like why are we paying car tabs for public transit and then these fare enforcement people are just giving the money to who knows what?
Yeah, I have a huge problem with there being like taxes and fees on stuff that has nothing, the funds of which go to things completely separate from the realm in which that thing exists. If you have car tabs or gas tax or something like that, it should go to stuff involving transportation, roads,
Yeah,
you know, stuff like that. Maybe a little bit of buses. But I would say that if the bus system were run efficiently, it could be self-funding based on even the tiny fares that it has.
yeah. And bicyclists should be registered just like any other car.
Well, yeah, you're using the roads.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And obviously, you know, you're not doing a lot of damage or taking up as much of the road as a car.
So you pay less.
Yeah, you pay a little bit less, but then no, if you're riding in the road, you should totally have to pay for that service. It's you know, look at it from a capitalistic standpoint. In a free market private system, you'd still pay to go through it. You know?
Yeah.
Dude, okay, so a guy swam through the Panama Canal, and he had to pay. It was like, you know, like less than $1 or something like that. But you know, the Panama Canal was expensive, and to go through it, you have to pay to use it. And yeah, so with the roads, I think it's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, geez, we covered all kinds of shit, didn't we?
Jesus, I know. And we could probably go on and on and on and on. But that does cover a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of stuff sprouted out of a pretty simple statement, you know.
Yeah, we got all the way to like licensing bicycles. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, and I'm all totally for that. Oh God.
Well, there's probably a lot of stuff we missed, so if people would just fill the comments in with whatever we missed, there's certainly some points that we didn't cover. So
yeah, I'd like to hear people's views, and there's probably a lot of things we didn't think of.
Yeah, do you feel taxation is theft, or do you think like, well, I budget for having those taxes taken out and it doesn't really affect me one way or the other, you know, like.
Yeah, or maybe it's worth it to pay those things because you feel like the state is using your money wisely.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how many people think that, but
Probably not many, and therein actually lies the problem. But there are some who do. But I welcome everybody's ideas and thoughts on that, and definitely keep the conversation going, because this is we have totally barely scratched the surface here, and we'll probably go back to this actually.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a million different ways we could go with this. So.
Oh man.
So I guess hang around for the music at the end, and thanks for Line. Thanks for deep sink diving with us.
Oh yeah. And kitchen sink microscopy glass.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Take the package, drop location, wait the signal, cut communication, for the fourth, code coercion, plug the cable, generate diversion, link the station, lock protection, find the target, Jupiter connection. Locate the target, Jupiter connection.